Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban. Welcome to episode 223 of the Lean Blog Podcast. It's June 2nd, 2015. My guest today is Christian Wolcott. He is a senior advisor and director of Kaizen Institute North America, and he is their director for Japan tours. Now, Christian was an integral part of the team for the Japan Lean Healthcare Tour that I helped promote and participated in last November as an instructor. Through the tour, Christian taught lean concepts and facilitated discussions along with me and our group of global attendees. So in this podcast, we're going to talk about some of our reflections and recollections about the tour, lessons learned, and reasons to go, which, beyond the lean learning, includes a lot of camaraderie and wonderful cuisine and evening discussions. And it's a really jam-packed week, but you'll make connections that will hopefully stay with you for a career and a lifetime. So we're planning another tour in September. You can go to japanleantrip.com to learn more and to sign up to receive more information. And for this episode, if you want to get links to learn more about this, go to leanblog.org/223. Christian, hey, thanks for joining us and for being a guest here on the podcast today.
Well, thanks, Mark. It's my pleasure to join you.
So, we're going to talk about these trips to Japan that we've taken and plan on taking again. But before we get into that, I think it would be great for the listeners if you introduce yourself and a little bit about your background and your career.
Sure, I'd be happy to. My name is Christian Wolcott. I'm a senior advisor and director with the Kaizen Institute, the U.S. business unit, and I'm also the director for Japan tours. My history, I guess, includes the spending 14 years coming out of the paper industry here in Wisconsin, where I live in a small community here in the upper Midwest. Learned a little bit about lean along the way, spending that time with that company. Although exclusively looking back, some of the things we did were not formalized lean knowledge or lean training, but rather kind of, just-in-time, total quality management, and then bits and pieces of what I would know today as being formalized lean tools, things like 5S and SMED and standardized work, that sort of thing. But over the years at the paper company, I originally started out as being a frontline supervisor, and then kind of midline manager, department manager along the way after 4 or 5 years or so, ISO facilitator, or complaint analyst, and then spent the last 4 or 5 years in production and inventory control management. Mm-hmm. And so really kind of learned a lot along the way about management, structure, styles, the importance of good process control, of policy deployment, the importance of conveying that information to kind of a diverse employee base in order to drive and achieve and hit targets, measurables, metrics along the way. He had some pain along the way, though, too. Paper industry, no surprise, has continuing evolution. So we had some of our needs to do setbacks along the way. So cultural changes amongst the process changes were something that I had a firsthand chance to be involved with. So I learned a lot in those days working for the paper company here. Transitioned out of the paper company, though, around 2005 in my memory now. Yes, about 2005. And joined up then with the Wisconsin MEP, Wisconsin Manufacturing Extension Partnership, mm-hmm. which is a consultancy devoted exclusively toward the betterment and growth of manufacturing companies here in our state. Learned an awful lot, a wonderful group of women and men working really hard to do just that. That's really where I learned the formalized ropes of the consulting world, and a bit more of the formalized, lean knowledge that I have to this day.
Yeah, now I'd like to go back to the paper company just briefly, and what you described there is interesting. It's unlike, it seems like what a lot of organizations do these days, where they have a lean initiative where they talk about lean, where it sounds like and correct me if I'm wrong, but at the paper company, there was just kind of a longer history of that's just how they did things from an evolution of TQM and lean practices. Was it that ingrained that they didn't have to really give it that specific label?
I look back now and I think for whatever reason, yeah, the lean label was not one that was used. In fact, I think in my memory, the just-in-time, the quality management teams that we had, and we did do, again, kind of experimentation, I would call it at this point, with standardizing work, with quick changeovers, that sort of thing. They were never labeled as being, this is lean thinking or Toyota production. That was never uttered. The word Toyota was never mentioned in any of the materials that we went to. And again, we were probably sent to, maybe 1 or 2 weeks of training each year over the years as a way to kind of infuse some additional skills to the management groups that I was part of.
When you moved into the MEP, then there was an opportunity, I guess, and the MEP programs around the country are, a lot of the states have done a lot of great work. I've blogged about this before and have heard a lot of good things about the Wisconsin MEP. Were they teaching people in a little bit more of the kind of typical we are teaching you about lean style, working with different small and medium-sized enterprises?
They were, yeah, you're right. They were, and I guess in fact, one piece that maybe I haven't mentioned is that toward the late '90s, even my time with the paper company, I did some of my own reading, just kind of purely out of interest and curiosity. Read the Toyota Way, that kind of thing, and we were doing some mapping at the company. I first picked up one of my first copies of Learning to See, which at the time, frankly, didn't make a lot of sense. I was trying to kind of make sense out of what we were doing. But then after joining MEP, I had the more formalized training with John Shook, who actually came to Madison, Wisconsin. We had a several-day workshop. So I actually learned it directly from him, which was beneficial, along with a lot of the other structure that comes with specific tools of lean. Learned that through the MEP, through the work with MEP.
Yeah, because personally, even though I use the word lean a lot, I mean, it's I don't know, it's an interesting balance where I think sometimes, the word is what it is, and people, it's a known, it's something people have heard of. But I think sometimes the word gets overused where if people reach out and talk about some practice and they'll ask, is that lean? And so, I don't know. I mean, like, what really matters is it better? Is it leading to the right type of organization, the right results? Like, I don't want to use lean as a synonym for good.
Exactly. And I think in some ways, what was interesting and kind of new to my eyes at the time was that working with the MEP centers, even in some of the small manufacturing companies here in Wisconsin, when you went in and when you mentioned the word lean, it was, kind of had a bad connotation to it. Organization X goes lean and lays off X amount of people. And we would continually have to reinforce the fact that our mission, and it was the mission of the MEPs, was to do just the opposite. It was not to, pare back the workforce at all. And that's similar to what we share at Kaizen Institute today. Right. And the central message, I think, that has to be conveyed along with it.
Yeah, so let's transition into talking about Kaizen Institute and the organization itself and your role. I mean, this is quite a global organization, right?
It is. Kaizen Institute is made up of about, I think, 15 different business units around the world. We are headquartered in Switzerland, although our founder, Masaki Amai, the author of Gemba Kaizen and Kaizen, is still alive and living in Tokyo. So the chance to go and kind of meet with him, and he still does public speaking, still meets with tour groups when we visit Japan, still travels the world to some degree with our clients, allows us to serve at a global level. And so we service a variety of sectors, everything from manufacturing through healthcare, banking, colleges, government systems, you name it. Anywhere that there's a client need, we are certainly, I think we have a diverse skills force that allows us to work in all of those sectors.
And before we talk about your role with the tours, you do a fair amount of consulting with organizations in North America or all over the place. Tell us about some of the work that you're involved in with clients.
Sure. Typically, my work is involved here in the U.S. We try to keep all the practitioners. There's about 375 or so globally. We try to keep the practitioners local to where the client needs are. It reduces, the travel time and distance and all that, which, again, as we study lean, is waste itself. I do probably 90% of my work here in the United States. It was a shift a little bit here. A couple of years ago, did a lot more work in Canada at the time. There was a great need up there. And so where I live here in Wisconsin kind of allows me to cross the border somewhat easily. Occasionally we do, though, get to a client need that'll take us out of country, which is always exciting, a chance to go and, see another culture and spend some time overseas. But, most of the work these days, the U.S.
Let's talk about the tours, because you and I had, great learning opportunity, great fun doing a tour back in November of 2014, and we're planning on doing these again here in the future. I'm curious, as you're an experienced lean practitioner and leader and sensei to organizations. What are some of the things that stand out to you on taking a trip to Japan to learn and see in that environment?
I think probably the greatest impact, or the greatest resource you get by visiting Japan, is the chance to go, in my words, to go to the original Gemba, to go to the actual place, to go to the country of origin where, contemporary lean thinking was born, and where it was kind of, crafted out through, trial and error. The company Toyota is there. Its headquarters is in Nagoya. Many of its suppliers are there in Nagoya, and a chance to go and walk through the halls and talk with the people and understand the culture. And I truly mean the corporate culture, but also the national culture that kind of bore this thinking of restraint and optimization and curiosity, frankly, with Kaizen and long-term commitment to continuous improvement. All those pieces kind of come together uniquely and present themselves in a way that you see, on a Japan tour differently than what you would, in any other country in the world. That's my belief, in my opinion, because you go there and there is something that's uniquely different about those companies, about their leadership style, about their leadership patience for change, and their approach to how they integrate the need to do business process and improvements in with their employees, regardless of what type of industry it is, whether it's healthcare or whether it's manufacturing.
Well, one thing that was interesting to me on the two tours I've had a chance to do back in 2012 and then in 2014, especially at the hospitals and some of the manufacturing companies. At the hospitals, we always had the CEO there. And at some of the other companies, they had very senior leaders, and not just in a ceremonial, oh, hi, I'm here to greet you kind of role, but really to do in-depth teaching and talking about their philosophy around quality and to hear that kind of depth of understanding from a senior executive level. Is something I don't think we always find here in the U.S., where I think a lot of executives say, well, I've delegated lean to somebody like Christian who works here or is a consultant, as opposed to really kind of owning it and embracing it internally.
Right. I think that kind of speaks again probably to, very somewhat unique national pride. If you ask them sincerely, can you tell us about your journey? Where did you start? How is it working? They're somewhat eager to tell you their story and to show you, not just speak of it, but show you their commitment from an executive level, from a leadership level, and how that cascades throughout the organization to get the results that they're currently getting. I think that's an important piece. It shows, a great deal of alignment within the organizations from top to bottom, which is an essential, piece that we try to teach with our clients, is, building that alignment in top to bottom, bottom to top, kind of holding each other accountable. And the chance, again, to go to Japan and take a look at, hospitals, and a chance to speak with their leadership. They have a chance to showcase that, and they do. They're very prideful in that when they want to show you their results, their project work, things that they've been successful with. But they'll also tell you the areas that maybe that they still continue to struggle with. And I think that's a fair piece. That's a real piece of their journey, and one that's really, again, it's another benefit of going there and hearing this.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and I'm still, trying to understand the country. It's a fascinating, enjoyable unique place to visit. There's these conundrums, like you talk about, the pride, but that's balanced with humility at the same time.
Yes.
Being kind of open about how things are, being, I think, proud of what they've developed there. But, the hospital CEOs, a couple of them mentioned W. Edwards Deming, who, of course, was an American. And I remember one of the hospital CEOs kind of brought him up, kind of almost lamenting that more Americans didn't appreciate Deming the way they do. Because I remember he was telling a story. He was at a conference in the United States, and he was, pleasantly surprised that somebody was talking about Deming. He's like, yeah, we know Deming. Deming meant a lot to us. So that's another conundrum, right?
Right.
What they've developed, but they will admit that they've learned from others.
Right. Right. And the truth of the matter is, most of the organizations that you have a chance to visit, they're eager to share with you their history. And they'll, even though some of the organizations may have been around for, let's say, 100 years, there were significant changes that came post World War II. Right. Rebuilding efforts, and some of the men and women that were sent, by the United States and other countries to go there with their rebuilding efforts certainly contributed to what we would see today as being, kind of modern lean thinking and methodology. Now, it's been, derived and refined through their hands and through their needs and through their environments. But certainly, they're very quick to point out, the people like Deming who were there, who spent time there, and who they learned from, and how they took that knowledge and incorporated into then their strategies.
And it's part of that strategy, I think, at the organizations other than Toyota, where Toyota is, obviously they talk about the history of the Toyota production system, which most of us would, equivocate to lean. The other organizations, it seemed like it was more kind of what you described from the paper mill, of kind of just this ongoing evolution of TQM and a couple of decades worth of effort, as opposed to, well, yeah, we went from doing nothing basically to this big lean initiative 3 years ago. It's a different kind of evolution than I tend to see with American hospitals. That's one thing that was really interesting. That just sort of evolved. Not that that evolution. They didn't stop doing TQM. It seemed like they've added other methods on top of it.
Right. I think that's something that's probably unique. It's fair to say to the world of healthcare. And I guess I've done enough work in healthcare over the years to say, pretty safely say, is that most healthcare leadership people and officials do not want to hear stories about how cars are built. And any analogies that are drawn from TPS are kind of skeptically looked at for the utility in the healthcare world, and to some degree that's true. In other areas, though, that there's a direct one-to-one comparator, and still things that can be carried over, in my mind, very plainly. You have to change the language just a bit, but ultimately some of the very same tools are utilized.
Well, I'm sure the similar thing was true back in the paper mill, right? These are large, capital-intensive, continuous processes. This isn't just people sometimes denigrate assembly. Well, we're not just slapping parts together. I mean,
right,
it's a very different environment, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And I'm hearkening back to my own days at General Motors when we were in machining and engine parts machining. And they said, well, we're not just slapping engines together. We're cutting metal. This is real manufacturing. We're different.
Right.
Everyone loves to focus on the we're different piece, and I think that national culture is a part of it. So in the tour last year, we had people from 8-9 different countries represented.
Yeah,
off the top of my head, among for the 18 of us, and I think there was a lot of common ground where people within the group. We're learning from the people we're visiting, and from you and Mr. Amai, and I'm babbling at them a little bit. They're learning from each other and comparing notes. And I think it's interesting to see how people realize that things really aren't that different within healthcare across different countries. I'm curious kind of what, some of your thoughts from what you talked to people about, what some of your reflections were.
Yeah. Some of the comments that were shared and stories that were shared by those tour the folks on the tour last fall, yeah, they're hospitals from a variety of different countries, as you mentioned. Some of those countries I have not been to personally, but hearing the stories of how things were playing out, certainly more similarities than dissimilarities. How things are integrated, how projects are managed, determining, the appropriate level of Kaizen, how active, is one site versus another. Finding support for it from an executive level, how sometimes that can be a lonely walk. I thought that was an interesting sort of parallel from site to site, regardless of the size of the institution, because some of the hospitals, some of the representatives of those hospitals were quite large. 1,300 beds, as I recall, from the one in Singapore.
One of them was, yeah.
800 beds at another. These are quite, these are large, healthcare complexes. And even with these large numbers, still finding it maybe somewhat difficult to find, champions for change within those groups. And I think that's, is that common? Sure it is. That's common regardless of what sector you're working in, but also somewhat reassuring then in the healthcare sector that, you're not so out there, you're not so alone. It's not just your site that maybe is having some of these issues. Mm-hmm. But a chance for them to, over dinner or during the course of the tour, to talk with each other, to say, you know what? Oh yeah, we've had that happen too, and this is what we've done. That community of sharing that starts on a tour and continues. Our desire is that it would continue long after the tour, is something that is kind of uniquely brought together by doing an activity like this.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, with both of the tours I've been involved with, there's a community that forms. You have that shared experience of, this trip to an unusual place, and you've got all these new experiences, and sometimes people go, in groups of 2 to 6 people, and sometimes you've got an individual from an organization, and it's interesting to be a part of those discussions of what people are discovering and discussing and what they're going to take home, or the connections they're building. People from different countries that keep in touch after the tours and share their struggles or share their successes, or that they can reach out to people in different parts of the world and find people that are more than happy to discuss and try to help each other out. I think that's one of the longer term benefits of a tour like this. It's really interesting to see.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that we certainly encourage and strive for with it. It's one of the value adds coming out of it, is that you would exchange information with each other. Not only you spend a week with each other, doing pretty busy days from beginning, from morning to night, touring a variety of sites and traveling together, being offered some lessons, some learning points. Some of the learning points are maybe things that some organizations have done some work with. Others, it's brand new. And that discovery piece, mm-hmm. and encouraging that if you need additional support beyond the tour, there's a place to reach out. You got some new faces. You made some new friends during the course of the week. A chance then to reach out and say, you know what, I'm doing this here at my site, or I'm kicking off this particular Kaizen activity over here, or I'm rolling out Hoshin planning, some policy deployment over here. And I want to kind of run this past you. Why? Because your organization has already done it. You told me so over dinner on Wednesday when we were having shabu shabu or something like that. That kind of connection, that's golden. And that's precisely what we're looking to do, as you mentioned, build a community of lean-minded, lean leadership people, in the healthcare sector.
Yeah, and the tour that we're both, or at least that I'm reminiscing about, or from last November, that was very specifically a healthcare oriented tour where it was a lot of physicians and executives from different countries. We went to, for the listeners' sake, to Toyota, a couple other non-healthcare companies, and we went to 3 different hospitals of different sizes around the country. And I think it's interesting to see lean in a different environment. Like you were saying, everyone wants to go see Toyota, but to see other Japanese companies and to hear what they're working on, I think was really interesting. But just as a quick sidetrack from that, tell listeners, Kaizen Institute also does tours for manufacturing audiences or broader or even private groups, right?
We do. In some ways, we kind of offer, I would say, probably fair to say, to kind of put the label of public tours on it, where the tours are, kind of for a general audience. In this case, we could say something like manufacturing or healthcare. So we know we have a diverse group of people coming in with very diverse needs. And so what we'll try to do is then select sites and teach lessons then throughout the course of the week, maybe to speak to a variety of needs. By contrast, then we would also offer more customized tours where we might have one organization that comes to us and says, we've got 10 or 15 people here. We want them specifically to learn about how to drive daily Kaizen, or a higher level. We want them to learn specifically about SMED or value stream mapping. And so there might be some very specific content that we're looking to teach, but also to see and view at some of the sites throughout the course of typically a 5-day week. And so there's a little bit more of a customized approach to it. It's one audience. There might even be some internal projects that are reviewed during the course of the week. So they're bringing their champions for change together, offering them some new information and some new guidance as well. Sometimes that comes through their own hands. So again, it's a chance to step away from their normal campus, their normal environment, for some fresh thinking, to get some fresh air, some new information, and revitalize their teams.
Yeah, it's kind of the most off-site you could have.
Yeah. Truly.
Yeah. And there could be benefit to that of kind of getting away, and to me the one thing about being in Japan is that a lot of it is in a way disorienting, or it forces you to really pay attention to everything that's going on, which I don't know, at least to me, I think that creates an opportunity that's ripe for learning and taking in new things, that you can't live on autopilot. Exactly. That week that you're in Japan, you really have to pay attention to everything and make sure, am I doing things the right way? Am I in line for the subway properly? Am I handing my money to somebody properly? I find that invigorating, being in an environment like that.
It truly is, and if you've never been to Japan before, the stark difference between the United States or Europe. I know I've been to a number of countries in Europe. Even some of the other Asian countries, the differences between there and Japan are in some cases, just tremendously high levels of contrast, tremendously stark. And you get there and you're forced, your paradigms are challenged the moment you step off the plane, and you realize, wow, these people think and behave differently than what we would at home, quote unquote. And that's from the train stations to the airports, to how things are visually communicated, to how things are handled at a street corner. I mean, rarely do you see. It's always struck me that the cleanliness of the cities in Japan, that they're intensely clean, kind of building on the same ideas that 5S promotes, everything in its place and a place for everything. And you look around and you go, I don't see a paper cup anywhere in the street, along the street. And I think, well, wow, there's a country that seems to believe in organization and cleanliness, not just a site, not just a department or an area. And you can see that, and the impact of that really kind of forces some new thinking and perspectives on, what could you do at home? Here's a massive example of order put in place. What could we do in our department?
Yeah, and I mean, that's one of those other conundrums I think I observed, is that Japan is obviously a very crowded, bright, vibrant, especially in Tokyo. There's so much going on. Oh, it's hectic, but at the same time, it's kind of calm and organized. Exactly. It's just, I don't know, I find it interesting, just to try to figure out those conundrums. And I think one of the other conundrums, you were talking earlier about national culture, I wanted to come back to. I've got a few friends from either Americans who have lived and worked in Japan, or a few Japanese friends who are classmates of my wife in business school. And I think it's interesting to hear, to read about, or even talk about during the tour, the aspects of Japanese culture that do seem to play directly into what we would call lean, the sense of order and discipline and process and respect for customers. You've never, anyone who hasn't been to Japan, you've never felt more taken care of than by people in a Japanese restaurant or a Japanese store. Like, they really fall over each other in a hotel, the lobby of a hotel. Like everyone is so eager to serve, you get kind of spoiled.
It truly
for a week there. And so there's a lot of this that seems to very much fall in line with lean. But then people talk about some other aspects of culture, about the parable or the analogy of the tall blade of grass gets mowed, and this idea of harmony and don't stick out and don't make waves. And that seems to sort of go against what these organizations have built in terms of a Kaizen culture.
True.
Where they do want people to speak up. They do, the CEO at the one hospital, said that he's kind of outspoken, and he was saying he's different than, maybe typical Japanese, and maybe that cascades through the organization. But it's funny, it's funny that some of this doesn't, the lean culture doesn't, or Kaizen culture doesn't exactly line up with Japanese culture in every business there. That's kind of interesting to try to unravel.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. It would be a gross overstatement to say that every organization in Japan is lean-minded and lean thinking. Well, that's simply not true. But certainly there's a number of organizations squarely, in the manufacturing sector, more recently in the healthcare sector, and spreading to other sectors in Japan, that have benefited from lean thinking and benefited from the history and the sharing of the history from and through Toyota's thinking. That's the simple truth, and one that's spread around the world. The fact that Toyota's operations are so concentrated in Japan, I think, kind of lends itself to there's more companies that probably are available to be seen. There are more examples in a concentrated area in Japan to go and tour to see those, to see that evidence. And
there's maybe kind of a final thing to talk about. There's so much fun to be had. I mean, obviously, we're going there to learn, and people are either paying or their companies are paying for the professional learning. But boy, you mentioned shabu shabu, and it's not just sushi. It's about food and drink. You get a chance to explore shochu. No, I think shochu is a new beverage that I've discovered, a alcoholic beverage, and there was some of that consumed. But it's fun to unwind after the day and reflect with people and enjoy Japanese food and beverage. That was to me, that's one of the highlights of the tour.
I would certainly agree with that. I know, you and I had along with a number of the folks that spent the evenings with us, we had some great sharing, some great stories. Can you still learn? Absolutely. I think sometimes that informal learning sometimes is even richer than a true training session can be, because it offers you the chance for, again, that sharing, that personal one-on-one. What'd you think? How did that really work out? How would you do that? And you're doing this in this, really rich environment of comfort and style, trying out some new things. In a lot of ways, the journey to lean is somewhat reflective of even how the meals are presented. Many small dishes. Some dishes are highly complex, others are very simple in terms of its presentation. But most of these meals that we spend together, they're a couple hours long, right? That we spent our evenings with. So it's not something that's rushed or hurried. So long-term thinking, kind of draw this out, brought to you in stages. And I kind of think that there's a parallel between, even the dining experience there on the tours in Japan, and even the lean journey itself. Again, the small bits, small steps, and a chance to share stories along the way. What'd you learn? What'd you like? I liked that, but not so much this one here. Okay. And you kind of learn as a group as you go along.
And those dinners were, they said, a little bit less formal opportunity to compare notes and learn from each other, and there's, I think, something to be said in the Japanese culture that food and drink helps facilitate that. And
it doesn't hurt, right?
We get a chance to experience that. But one other thing, and I'm hungry just thinking about it. Even the most simple piece of grilled chicken in Japan can be such a phenomenal thing to taste, and it's just it's really interesting to experience. I'd like my wife to go someday, and she would be interested in learning about all this professionally and to see the country. She's allergic to seafood, but as I've told her, like, you could spend an entire week not eating sushi, not eating any fish. There's all this great chicken and beef and pork.
Yes.
So lots to enjoy.
No worries if certainly, Japan being basically an island country, is there a lot of seafood? Yes, a lot of their diet is the seafood, but there certainly are many other good food types that are, beef and chicken and other things that are not fish.
Yeah.
You won't starve. You don't have to pack crackers in your suitcase if you're going to Japan for the tour for the week.
Yeah. And so hopefully that's part of the new horizons. Try some new foods, just all the things that are different and unique about Japan. And some people fall in love with the Japanese toilets, which with the heated seats and all the buttons and functions.
It certainly, if you've never had a chance to experience one, that alone will make a memory.
So, boy, okay. So let's. I need to find a different note to end on here. Do you have any other just kind of thoughts or reflections if someone is wondering, should they make a trip like this? How would you kind of explain or walk through with someone if they're debating if this is something that would be good for them and their own education and their organization? What case would you make?
Well, I think every organization should be encouraged to take a look at their current objectives, their current strategy. How successful have they been, or are they to date with rolling and integrating lean thinking into their organization, not separate, but integrating it together? Typically, the question comes, how much, executive leadership support do we enjoy within our company? And if the answer to that doesn't come quickly, and there's a lot of discussion or uncertainty about it, that alone might be the flag to say, you know what, then we need to come together in communities so we have alignment within our group to drive a lean strategy, or any strategy for that matter. A chance for us to come together, break away, move away for 5-6 days, and get off site, get off campus, and go take in some new information. A chance for the organization's leadership to breathe together, to come to alignment, to understand and say, you know what, there's some tools, there's some techniques, there's some methodology that I think we can learn from. And whether we call it lean or we call it our own, we could come together and kind of come to consensus a bit, in our minds. This is what we need to do. This is how it could play out. And we can see some examples, some evidence, and a chance to talk them with other leadership figures who have done this, who have been on the journey for a while. Again, it's a great opportunity to build your team or reinvigorate your team.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point, I think, about trying to bring an executive or bring leaders along. I think some of the groups I've seen had people within the group from the same organization that were really gung-ho about lean, and then others that they were trying to educate and trying to get on board. And I think going as a group, or at least a small group, allows people to discuss, as you were saying, well, what are we going to do when we go back? Because I think hopefully nobody is going expecting to find a bunch of quick, easy answers. But it's I think education, and it's eye-opening, and these opportunities to then think about how to go apply this back home. And it's going to be different, transferring these ideas back to their own country, back to their own organization. But I think that's a very necessary part of the process of thinking through more on the way there, during the trip, on the way home. I think those benefits often kind of come from people's own reflections and discussion.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
I
would agree.
So, we're planning, Christian and I, we're excited to be planning another trip again later this year. I'll post links in the show notes if you'd like to reach out and contact us to learn more about the trip and kind of details and price and agenda. Certainly hope you'll come and join us. And, again, I know we have a lot of international listeners on the podcast. We've had people from all corners of the world be part of these tours, and I think that's one of the strengths of them, is that Kaizen Institute helps attract kind of a global group and does a first-rate job with all the planning and logistics, things that the team out beyond Christian help manage and take care of. So it's a big team effort, and you get to take advantage of that experience and those resources when you do the trip. So I'm happy to not just endorse it, but to be a part of the trip. It's a great group effort, Christian. So
yeah, well, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. We're looking forward to it as well. Again, it's always a joy for us to go meet new people and explore and discover new things. Every tour allows for greater levels of discovery.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Christian. Again, our guest has been Christian Wolcott from Kaizen Institute, and want to thank you for being a guest here with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.